Welcome back to the Williams Real Estate Channel. I'm your host, Geordie Williams. Today we are discussing breaking news. What will be the impact of Trump's tariffs in the US? So before we get into that, I thought it'd be good to understand a little bit more around Trump himself and his key philosophies when it comes to his negotiation style. If you've read his book, The Other Deal, this is, these Trump tariffs are classic, his tactical negotiation style. Think big. Trump emphasizes to aim to think high. If you're going to do anything, do it large. Secondly, is protect the downside and the upside will take care of itself. Always consider, he says, of what could go wrong in a deal, and you can handle the worst case scenario, then all the bold risks are worth taking. Maximize your options. So being flexible is key. Trump believes. Trump takes all options, hence why he switches his strategy left, right, and center, very unpredictable. Allows him to have multiple options in any situation so he can not be boxed into one scenario. Know your market is another key point. So this would relate to him understanding the US market, what they're capable of doing. If he's going to try and bring in more manufacturing into the US, such as manufacturing cars from around the world. We already see Hyundai setting up a new factory in the US. He needs to know his market. Can they actually deliver that product to the rest of the world? Because otherwise tariffs would not be really that effective in trying to rein in companies into the US. Use leverage. This is one of probably the biggest key points he's using right now with these tariffs, is using leverage. As an example, these tariffs he's putting on all the countries is ultimately bringing all the countries to him to try and negotiate a deal. As when you apply leverage, Trump says he always tries to put himself in a position where the other party needs him more than he needs them. So hence why we're now seeing 75 odd countries lining up at the White House trying to cut a deal. Enhance your location. So this can be referred to enhancing the location. This is more of a real estate model where you can improve a site, such as a rundown site, to, even though it's in a great location, improve the site, maximize the value of that location. So in this scenario, he's bringing the likes of car manufacturers back to Detroit to improve the location of that city. Get the word out. I mean, he loves to fill the Oval Office with press. He loves the attention, all about promoting himself and the US to draw attention. Fight back. Trump doesn't shy away from confrontation. If someone's wrong to you, if someone wrongs you, he believes in pushing back. That's obvious. Deliver the goods, no matter the hype. You need to follow through. And Trump emphasizes the results matter in the long term. So even though this is short-term pain, he believes that he'll be able to deliver the goods in the long run and ultimately have fun is another key takeaway from his book. I mean, you can see him on the golf course. He doesn't really give a flying fuck about anything that's really going on. He's having the time of his life. So That's if you can understand Trump and his philosophy around his thinking of negotiations, then you can understand, okay, this is how he's playing the game. That brings us to, are we heading into a crash GFC like event? What are my thoughts? No, I don't believe so. Not yet, in any case. If you study the land market, you'll know we're about 18 months to 2 years away from when we are due to go through the next land-driven downturn, which will be like the next GFC-like event. So these tariffs and the noise around the tariffs is only short-term, I believe, based off not only this 18-year land cycle where we sit in the market, we are in a strong position still. We're not due yet. Further to that is also Gann's decade cycle. Haven't put this out as much, but it is quite relevant to, I guess, give clarity in times of volatility. We're in the year of ending in 5. So if you look back at history, you'll see that years ending in 5 have always been very bullish years. 2015, 2005, 1995, back to, right, keep going back. But we are now in 2025, based off Gann's decade cycle. We are due for a strong bullish year and due for a top out in 2026, 2027. Come 2027, we're due for a significant downturn. So this potentially is just a blip in the market of where the markets could actually be heading over the course of 2025. Also, the Benner cycle, quite interesting. This was created in 1875 by an economist. And if you can see on the key dates, I guess top in 1989, before we went through the 91 recession we had to have, bottom, recovery, big boom up into the peak of 1999, panic, late 1999 when we went through the dot-com bust, low, and then recovery up into the peak of 2007 for the GFC, before we went through the GFC, 2008, 9, 10 into 2012. We then recovered out of the GFC, boomed up to 2016 top, and then had a panic in 2019 before COVID, or when COVID started to commence. Big COVID recession, or not, mid-cycle slowdown into the low of 2022, 2023, and then we recovered. And we are on the way now up to 2026, where markets will top out come 2026. So I don't believe we are entering a significant downturn yet in 2025. We've still got a little way to go, but this is very interesting, and this was created over 100 years ago. So time will tell, but this is another indicator I keep track of. Maybe worthwhile saving it, take a screenshot, and track it as the cycle plays out. Next up, what will the US tariffs, what could they do to impact Australia? Let's start with the US tariffs on Australia. What are they? 10%. 10% tariffs on Australia, which is not really much in the big scheme of things. We export about 2% of Australian GDP to the US, and that is pretty much comprising of beef exports. So the beef industry will feel the pain the most, and they'll either have to price that 10% into their product and then end up just increasing your prices by 10%, and or find other markets to export beef and agriculture products too. So 10% is more of a revenue raising tariff. It's not big enough to really stop trade. It's more so providing that mechanism to increase revenue for the US, but ultimately the people who live in the US will end up paying higher. It will be inflationary to the US and potentially deflationary to Australia. Australia will have to find other markets to diversify away from, but at the end of the day, 2% of Australian GDP goes to the US. It's not really much. It really won't impact the markets that much. The other way we got to look at it is the US tariffs on China could have more of an impact on the Australian economy and the Australian property markets. As China, I mean, they're currently going back and forth, slapping each other with tariffs. They haven't got to the table yet to negotiate. I'm sure they will. But Trump is up to 125% tariff on China, basically saying you can't export anything to the US. What will that do to China? It'll slow their already weak economy. So a weak China will have a flow-on effect to Australia as we export about 5% of Australian GDP to China, which mostly comprises of iron ore, coal, and liquid gas. This comes out of our mining sector, which is in the regions of Queensland, WA, and Northern Territory. So those regions and their respective property markets could well be impacted, and I believe they already have been impacted even prior to these tariffs. Perth, as you can see, has been away at the races, but it looks to have reached its limits and started to top out. Back in 2005-6, equivalent point of time, had a solid further few years of run. That's when China had its economy booming. China's economy is not as strong this time around, this cycle, and now it's got big pressure from the US. So this could have a flow-on effect to these regions. So Perth potentially could be topping out and entering the next subdued negative growth path in the years ahead. Same with Port Hedland. If you look back at history, big boom in the last mining boom, and then topped out in 2013-14, went through the big downturn, started to recover, but is not experiencing this significant boom this cycle, this time around, because China's not as strong. Same goes for Darwin. Units had a big solid boom prior cycle in 2005, 6, 7, big lead up to 2014, 15, and then went through the downturn, hasn't recovered since, and isn't experiencing the significant boom again, like what happened in the same point of the cycle in the prior cycle. So again, these markets are probably a little bit more fragile this time around, won't experience that significant boom like what happened historically. Same goes for houses in Darwin, hasn't really kicked off like what happened in 2005 to 2012, 13. And the likes of Rockhampton is still away at the races, along with the likes of Townsville away at the races. Historically did do so from 2005 all the way up to 2007. So it could still happen, but the boom may be held a little bit shorter this time around, as history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And now that we have China in a weaker position, they might not be pumping up these markets as hard as they did in the prior cycle, as they're not as strong. So as these markets are dependent on the mining sector, these markets will be the most impacted in terms of these tariffs and China's economy. However, Trump has paused for 90 days for all countries. 75 countries have reached out to the White House and they're lining up to cut a deal. Ultimately, he's using leverage to cut deals to make him the best position for the US. So I don't believe they will be sustainably held in place. These tariffs, he's using them as a negotiation tool to cut deals. China, the only country that has retaliated. So China's tariffs are now up to 125%. So we'll see how that plays out. But as I said, if it does go pear-shaped with China, the markets that will be impacted are regional Queensland, Northern Territory around Darwin, and regional WA and Perth. These markets may not boom like they did in the prior cycle. So that will make demand shift back to the likes of Sydney and Melbourne, and they'll then lead again, which I can already feel it happening on the ground. Probably before they did so in 2006, 7 and onwards. Could be starting now. So time will tell, but the markets are starting to rally back again. Stock markets, that is. Confidence is coming back. I believe by the end of 2025, we'll be in all-time highs again, and it'll be euphoria. Every man and his dog will be charging in with the fear of missing out, which will provide us the famous great setup for the coming downturn in the coming years. As always, this is by no means financial advice. Talk to your financial planner, accountant, lawyer, seek third-party advice before you make any investment decision. But if you want help from a buyer's agent perspective, buying an investment-grade property, shoot me an email, send me some feedback, like, subscribe, comment, share with someone that you think would see value in this. Grab your popcorn and see how this all plays out. Until next time, thanks for watching.